Welcome, friends. In this video, we will be exploring one of the most dangerous places on planet Earth. Sit back and enjoy, and leave a comment and like if you enjoyed watching. I'm grateful that you are here. If this kind of thriller stories amazes you, don't forget to subscribe as well so you never miss out on future updates. There is a place on this planet that almost no one has ever seen. A place so remote, so unreachable, that if you stood there, the nearest human being would be orbiting above you. Not on land, not on a ship, but in space. They call it Point Nemo, the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. It's not marked on most maps, and you'll never hear tourists talk about it, because no one goes there willingly, and maybe that's for a reason. For decades, sailors whispered about a patch of water where radios went silent, where compasses spun aimlessly, and where, sometimes, voices echoed through the static voices that weren't supposed to exist. But Point Nemo isn't a legend. It's real. A set of cold coordinates. 48 degrees, 52.6, 123 degrees, 23.6 W. Right in the heart of the South Pacific, the farthest place from any land on Earth, more than 2,600 kilometers from the nearest shore. If you were stranded there, rescue would never come. No aircraft routes pass overhead. No shipping lanes cross nearby. It's an oceanic desert, a place humans have ignored for as long as they've known it existed. But the ocean never forgets. Beneath that endless surface, more than 4,000 meters deep, lies silence thicker than concrete. No coral, no sunlight, just miles of black water, pressing down with the weight of mountains. And somewhere within that darkness are the remains of things we've thrown away. Things that once circled the Earth. Things that should have burned up, but didn't. You see, Point Nemo is where space goes to die. For decades, NASA and other space agencies have aimed their falling satellites here. When a spacecraft is no longer useful, they guide it back through Earth's atmosphere, burning most of it. And what's left crashes down into that cold, silent grave. Hundreds of carcasses lie there now. Soviet stations, cargo ships, space labs, fragments of what once watched over us. A secret cemetery of human technology, hidden at the bottom of an ocean so empty it swallows everything whole. But there's something off about Point Nemo, because every few years, strange sounds ripple from its direction. Low-frequency noises, too loud, too deep to come from a whale. In 1997, the U.S. NOAA, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, caught one of those sounds. They named it the bloop. It was the loudest underwater sound ever recorded, louder than a volcanic eruption, so powerful that microphones 5,000 kilometers apart picked it up. At first, scientists thought it came from a living creature, something enormous, something far bigger than any known animal on Earth. But when they traced the source, it came from near Point Nemo. Coincidence? Maybe. But the timing was strange, because just months before the bloop, a piece of space junk, an unregistered module from a defunct station, had been deliberately steered to that same region. Its trajectory wasn't public. Its cargo, manifest. It's still classified. And soon after it splashed down, instruments nearby began to fail. Satellite links cut out. Deep-sea sensors stopped transmitting. A few researchers called it an anomaly. Others called it interference. But one scientist, Dr. Rena Markovich, claimed she'd picked up rhythmic pulses from that spot, as if something down there was still moving. She filed her report, and within a week, it was sealed. No one saw her name in the public database again. To this day, the coordinates of the bloop and the impact zone overlap almost perfectly. And yet, when officials were asked if there was anything down there, they simply said, "Nothing lives that far from the sun." But what if that's the point? What if we've been dumping more than just metal into that graveyard? What if, somewhere beneath 13,000 feet of water, something found a way to survive the silence? Because new hydrophone arrays have started picking up patterns again. Not random, not geological. Patterns, beats, echoes that rise and fall, like breath. And they always start near Point Nemo. The sound came again. Not once, not twice, but in intervals. Every 41 minutes and 30 seconds. A pulse, soft, low. Too perfect to be random. At first, the NOAA analysts thought it was a system glitch. Their hydrophones had been recording for weeks. The ocean is full of noise. Ice cracking, earthquakes rumbling across tectonic plates, whales calling from thousands of miles away. But this one was different. It repeated identical pitch, identical spacing, almost like a code. When they triangulated the signal, the coordinates pointed to a blank square on the map, the same cold coordinates, 48 degrees, 52.6 S, 123 degrees, 23.6 W. Point Nemo. In the months that followed, the pulse kept returning. It grew fainter each week, like something sinking deeper, farther from the microphones. Then, without warning, it stopped. Silence. A silence that lasted 2 whole years, until a Russian research vessel, the Vityaz XII, reported something strange. While drifting through the South Pacific on an unrelated mission, their sonar picked up a sudden reflection, a shape, large, metallic, slowly rising from the seafloor, then vanishing. They logged it, sent the data back to Moscow. The next day, the Vityaz XII's entire communication system shorted out. They had to return to port manually, navigating by stars like sailors from another century. No official explanation. But the crew told a story. At night, they said, the water glowed faintly blue, and beneath the glow, they heard something tapping against the hull, slow, steady, like knuckles on metal. When the ship finally docked, the captain refused to talk to journalists. He simply said, some places were never meant to be measured. Years later, 2002, a private research company called Aquilus Deepworks announced a deep-sea expedition, Project Echo. Their mission was to reach Point Nemo, deploy unmanned drones, and map the supposed space debris graveyard. They secured funding, hired marine engineers, and built submersibles rated for 7,000 meters. It took 3 years to prepare. In early 2005, Project Echo launched. They departed from Chile under gray skies and cold winds. On board were 7 crew members and a remote control sub named Ariel 3. For the first few days, everything went smooth. Calm seas, no interference. But as they approached the coordinates, something strange started happening. Their GPS units began drifting. Every few minutes, the position shifted by small, impossible amounts, as if the ocean itself was moving the satellites. They double-checked with ground control. No errors, just displacement. The closer they got to Point Nemo, the worse it became. On the 4th night, their sonar caught something massive beneath them. Not rock, not debris. It moved. Then the radar went black. They deployed Ariel 3. For hours, they watched its live feed descend through the darkness. Black water, then gray mist, then total void. Pressure readings stable. Cameras fine. Until static. For 17 minutes, they lost signal. Then, the feed returned. But the view was wrong. The seafloor looked smooth, like glass, and there were markings. Perfect circles etched into the sediment, glowing faintly with some kind of luminescent growth. The team recorded everything. They marked the timestamp. Then the feed cut out again, this time for good. Ariel 3 was never recovered. 2 days later, the crew turned back. Their systems kept glitching, power surges frying components, one by one. When they docked back in Valparaiso, all footage from the dive had corrupted. Every file, except one. A single 3-second clip survived. It showed the sub descending slowly, and then a sudden flash of light, like lightning underwater. A distorted hum filled the speakers, low and pulsing. Then, a whisper, barely audible through the static. "We're not alone down here. No one knows who said it." Half the team denied it was any of them. The company went bankrupt months later. Its assets were seized, and Project Echo disappeared from public record. But in 2011, a leaked file surfaced online, a partial transcript of the dive logs. At the bottom of one entry, written by the mission's lead engineer, were just 6 words: "Signal resumed, coming from below us. They say the ocean is Earth's last. Unknown. But sometimes it's better that way. Because if the signal really did come from beneath Point Nemo, then what's down there isn't dead metal or drifting junk. It's listening, and maybe it's waiting." For almost a decade, Point Nemo stayed silent. No ships, no signals. The world moved on, and the story of Project Echo became another ghost tale for internet forums. But the ocean never forgets, and it never stays quiet for long. In 2015, a private satellite network called Lumenscope began testing new oceanic mapping systems. Their goal was simple: build a real-time scan of Earth's magnetic field. But when their sensors passed over the South Pacific, something strange happened. The readings dropped to 0, a void, as if the satellite was flying over. Find nothing. They rechecked the data. No software errors, no storms, just absence. Like the Earth itself was missing a piece. Then came the interference, a soft hum, bleeding into their communication feed. It wasn't radio static, it was organized. Repeating tones layered in perfect sequence. Someone, or something, it was broadcasting. Lumenscope traced the transmission back to ocean coordinates: 48 degrees, 52.6 S, 123 degrees, 23.6 W. Point Nemo. Again, the team thought it was a prank, a pirate radio signal bouncing off the ionosphere. But when they decoded it, the message made no sense. Just a voice, human, male, repeating the same numbers again and again. Coordinates, frequencies, and one phrase whispered between the digits: "Return vector incomplete." The file was timestamped at 3:14 a.m. UTC, the exact moment a decommissioned European satellite, the Helios 913, was supposed to crash in that same region. Only one problem: it never did. The object vanished mid-re-entry. No debris, no splashdown signature, just gone. Days later, the hum grew stronger. Hydrophones across the Pacific picked it up. A continuous, low-frequency wave pulsing from deep beneath the surface, identical to the 1997 bloop, but reversed, as if something below was replaying it backward. At NOAA headquarters, analysts tried isolating the waveform. Buried in the static was something else, a pattern that looked eerily like Morse code. When translated, it spelled 6 words: "Return vector found, not human origin." The message was never made public. The report was buried in a classified archive, labeled "Acoustic Anomaly, Geophysical." But a few fragments leaked through internal servers months later, and a former technician posted one line before deleting his account: "The ocean just spoke back." By 2017, the activity around Point Nemo had grown impossible to ignore. Fishermen from Chile and French Polynesia began reporting strange currents. Waters that should have been calm started to churn violently for no reason. Their compasses jittered, and sometimes, when they dropped microphones into the deep, they heard faint mechanical echoes, like machinery moving underwater. A marine geologist, Dr. Hana Kuroda, led a small expedition from New Zealand to study it. Her team never planned to go near Nemo, only to sample the waters around it. But on the 3rd day, their instruments began detecting subsonic vibrations from directly under the coordinates. Rhythmic, pulsing, almost like sonar. She logged everything in her notes. "We may be hearing self-generated pings, but they're not ours. They're responding." That night, at exactly 2:37 a.m., every monitor aboard her ship flickered. Lines of code filled the screens, symbols no one recognized, looping endlessly. Then one phrase appeared, clear as day. Do not approach. Moments later, their power died. Engines stalled. The ocean around them went completely still. No wind, no current, not even the sound of waves. For 13 minutes, it was as if the world had paused. Then, without warning, their systems rebooted. Everything worked again. But when they checked their navigation, they weren't where they had been. They drifted over 50 nautical miles. Overnight, straight toward Point Nemo. Dr. Kuroda's logs end there. Her last recorded entry is dated March 19th, 2017. At 4:11 a.m., the sea is louder tonight. Something beneath us is awake. Her ship, the Kaikoura Dawn, was later found abandoned and adrift. No crew, no signs of struggle, only a single laptop, its hard drive wiped clean except for one unnamed audio file. The file contained nothing but breathing, human, slow, uneven, and at the end a single sentence, distorted beyond clarity, but unmistakable: "We shouldn't have come here." Since then, no government agency has confirmed another expedition to Point Nemo. Officially, the coordinates remain a maritime exclusion zone for satellite re-entries. Unofficially, it's become something else: a listening post, a black hole for the sounds of the deep. But if the transmissions keep repeating, if the hum continues to grow stronger, then maybe Point Nemo isn't just where the ocean ends. Maybe it's where something else begins. In 2021, a defense tech contractor called Orpheon Systems quietly announced an ocean mapping initiative. Publicly, it was about testing deep pressure drone prototypes. Privately, the coordinates in their internal memos pointed to one location, Point Nemo. The project name was Abyssal Return. Only a handful of people knew about it, and fewer were cleared to see the data. The drones they built weren't like anything before. 10-foot spheres of titanium alloy, designed to survive 11 kilometers of pressure. Each one carried a suite of LiDAR, sonar, and high-definition optical sensors built to record every inch of the seafloor. Their plan was simple: drop 3 drones, let them map everything, and pull the footage 48 hours later. No crew, no risk. On June 4th, 2021, the first drone, AR-1, was released from the deck of a remote vessel drifting near Nemo's latitude. The second followed 6 hours later. The third was held in reserve. At first, telemetry was flawless, pressure steady, data flow smooth. Then, ARI's signal began to lag, milliseconds at first, then full seconds. By depth 3,200 meters, a faint hum started bleeding into its microphones. The same frequency NOAA had logged 24 years before. Control engineers muted the channel, assuming feedback, but the hum kept rising. It shifted pitch, then flattened out into a perfect tone, 440 hertz, the same frequency orchestras used to tune instruments, exactly 440. A coincidence, but nobody laughed. When AR-1 hit 6,000 meters, the sonar feed froze. Then something flickered across the optical lens, a shadow moving against the light of the sub's own flood lamps. Too large to be sediment, too fluid to be metal. It passed behind the camera once, then again, slower, as if circling. Telemetry spiked. Depth readings swung violently: 6,000 and 25,000, 980, 6,000 and 30. The ocean doesn't do that. Not that deep. Then the image cut to black. All that returned was data. Temperature drop 3.6 degrees, pressure fluctuation Z%, and a faint return ping from directly beneath AR-1, as if something down there had just activated sonar of its own. For 6 minutes, both sides pinged each other in near-perfect rhythm. Then the deeper signal stopped. One last echo rose from below, a double pulse, then silence. Moments later, ARI was gone. The second drone, ARZ, was deployed immediately. To reduce interference, they disabled all active sonar and ran passive sensors only. It descended without issues until 8,900 meters, well past the expected floor. That's when it detected movement. Not a shape this time, but light. Tiny points glimmering across the abyss, spreading outward in geometric lines. Triangles, circles, arcs. A lattice that looked engineered, not natural. The onboard computer marked the pattern as unknown bioluminescence. But the arrangement was too precise, the glow steady, the angles mathematically perfect. One engineer whispered, "It looks like a grid." Then the lights began shifting, rearranging themselves into symbols. First a spiral, then a sequence of dots. 3, 1, 4, then 2, then 6. 3.1416 pi. The team froze. Math intentional. Seconds later, ARZ transmitted one final frame, a view of the seafloor rippling like fabric, as if the ground itself was breathing. Then, signal lost. Orpheon Systems pulled the last drone AR-3 from the schedule. But before they could leave, something else happened. Their ship's radar detected an object rising rapidly from below. No signature, no ID. It stopped just short of the surface and hovered. The water around it bulged, forming a perfect circle roughly 50 meters wide. For a few minutes, the sea was completely still, and then, just as suddenly, it collapsed. Whatever it was, it went back down. They called it an upwelling anomaly, but the captain's log said something different. The ocean looked like it was taking a breath. 2 weeks later, Orpheon shut down its marine division. The footage remains classified. But a month after the shutdown, fragments appeared on a private data board used by amateur radio operators. The files contained faint audio from AR-I's final seconds. Not static, not mechanical. It was a pattern of tones that repeated 3 times, paused, then reversed. When converted to spectrogram, the waveform formed a shape, a set of coordinates, and when plotted on a map, they led right back to Point Nemo. But this time, the numbers were slightly different, just enough to suggest movement. They say the ocean has no memory, but Point Nemo remembers everything we've ever sent there. And maybe, just maybe, it's starting to send something back. For months after the Orpheon incident, the ocean was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels deliberate, like the calm breath before something exhales. But in early 2000, the silence broke. A string of deep-sea microphones, owned by 3 separate research agencies, picked up a sound. Not a roar, not a quake, an echo. It lasted exactly 7 minutes and 3 seconds. And when analysts lined up the waveform against old NOAA archives, they froze. The pattern matched the 1,997 blue almost perfectly, but this one wasn't fading into the distance. It was coming up. The amplitude rose with each minute, as though something enormous was moving toward the surface. Then, midway through, the sound changed pitch. It began to imitate human frequencies, the same range as speech. Not words, just the rhythm of breathing. In, out, slow, measured, intentional. The agencies compared notes, but none of them wanted to claim it. Officially, they called it subglacial reverberation. Unofficially, engineers started calling it the echo below. Soon after, radar stations in the southern Pacific began reporting strange, atmospheric flickers, tiny distortions that danced over the water like heat, haze. Satellites showed faint rings forming around Point Nemo, perfect concentric circles of microcurrents moving counter to the planet's natural rotation. No wind, no tide, just motion, as if stirred from beneath. When computer models tried to simulate it, the data looped endlessly. Every equation fed back into itself, producing the same 3-word output in corrupted file names. Source: not found. At the same time, vessels thousands of kilometers apart began receiving faint radio bursts on emergency channels, bursts carrying background noise identical to deep-sea sonar. Each transmission ended with the same, a perfect 440 Hz A tone, the same note from AR-1. By mid-year, rumors started to spread online. Anonymous ocean data leaks. Audio files claiming to be live feeds from the South Pacific. Most were hoaxes, but a few carried real metadata, tagged with official NOAA serials. In those clips, you could hear it clearly, a low hum, cycling every 41 minutes and 30 seconds. The pulse had returned. After 25 years, the same timing, the same location, the same precision, only now it was stronger. Scientists who tracked it noticed another pattern. Each pulse coincided with a minor magnetic deviation detected by satellites passing overhead. Tiny shifts, but synchronized down to the millisecond. Something under Point Nemo was interacting with Earth's magnetic field, pushing back. Then came the visual proof. Not in October 20.Z, a weather satellite photographing cloud patterns over the South Pacific captured a frame anomaly, a thin column rising from the seawater, not vapor, but distortion. A vertical blur stretching upward for nearly 200 meters before fading into the air. Infrared sensors recorded nothing, as if the column had no temperature. When analysts enhanced the image, the water around the column formed faint rings, the same rings shown in sonar. They ran the coordinates. Point Nemo. Again, governments dismissed it. They called it a lens flare, a data glitch, a compression artifact. But the public wasn't convinced. Independent trackers kept scanning the area. One by one, their instruments failed. Magnetometers jammed, GPS drifted, sat phones lost connection within minutes. And yet, right before each system went dark, they all logged the same final reading. A single ping from below, so deep it broke the lower range of the sensor. A pulse, identical to the bloop, but inverted, as if something below was imitating the sound of its own discovery. Today, every transmission from that region is filtered before public release. Hydrophones are under maintenance. Drones are awaiting recalibration. But sometimes, late at night, radio operators scanning long-wave bands hear faint rhythmic clicks under the static. When plotted on a spectrogram, the waveform forms a spiral, and when overlaid on a map, the spiral's center is always the same. Point Nemo. They say the ocean hides its secrets in echoes. But this echo, remembers who listened first. By the start of 2023, Point Nemo was officially silent again. The papers said the signal had resolved. But anyone who'd been watching the data knew that silence can be a kind of activity, the pause before a recording starts. In February, a joint research relay buoy named Ariel 9 was dropped near the coordinates. It wasn't built for exploration. It was built for listening. Every 4 hours, it would ping the ocean floor, store the return in a protected cache, and beam the encrypted waveform to a satellite overhead. For 13 days, the data came through clean, gentle thermal noise, whale calls in the distance, pressure creaks like breathing metal. Then, on the 14th day, the relay sent a packet larger than anything in its memory, exactly 1 minute and 2 seconds long. When analysts opened it, the file refused to play. It wasn't audio anymore. It had converted itself into code binary, shaped like stacked rings. A glitch, maybe, until they ran it through a spectrum visualizer. The rings rearranged into lines. The lines bent into waveforms, and suddenly the sound existed again. At first, it was just the ocean quiet, steady. Then a pattern rose beneath it, 4 tones, spaced evenly, rising each time by a half step. After the 4th, silence. Then another 4, a repeating scale that matched the harmonic signature of the Earth's Schumann resonance, the frequency of the planet itself. The deeper they listened, the more the tones began to mirror themselves, folding into symmetrical pulses. And at the 30-second mark, the waveform snapped into near-perfect rhythm, beats, like a metronome, ticking every 2 seconds. On the spectrogram, The ticks spelled out coordinates, longitude, latitude directly over Point Nemo. Underneath, faint modulation whispered through the noise, like reversed audio. When reversed again, it revealed 3 repeated syllables, not language, not human, just sound shaping itself into rhythm. Analysts described it as something trying to learn the pattern of speech. At I-minute 2 seconds, the tone stopped. No fade. Just a sharp cutoff that followed by a burst of carrier noise that spiked every instrument on the relay. Aerial Q's internal clock reset to 0 hours, RUTC. Then its transmission log erased itself backward, frame by frame, until the file header vanished. When the next satellite pass tried to contact it, there was nothing. No buoy, no debris, just open water and a small, perfect circle of calm, exactly 30 meters wide, a patch of ocean so still that radar passed through it like glass. 2 weeks later, a fishing vessel hundreds of miles away reported picking up a stray radio ping, a single tone 440 hertz, clear as a tuning fork. They thought it was interference until their onboard clock froze at 0 hours UTC, the same moment Ariel 9 vanished. That was the last verified transmission tied to Point Nemo. But in deep-sea monitoring labs, when technicians leave their scopes running overnight, a few claim they still catch short bursts of those 4 tones, soft, rising, repeating, like something replaying the world's heartbeat back to itself. A test signal from the abyss, or a rehearsal. For centuries, the Pacific's gyres have spun the same direction clockwise in the south, counter in the north, predictable, obedient, eternal. Then, in the spring of 2023, the satellite saw something that broke that rule. The current around Point Nemo began to hesitate. At first, it looked like turbulence eddies colliding, maybe a storm front below the surface. But storms don't move against rotation. This one did. A narrow ribbon of water peeled away from the South Pacific gyre and began sliding east to west, carving its own lane through still sea. It held shape for weeks, like a path drawn by invisible hands. Oceanographers called it the drift zone. When buoys entered that band, their data clocks lost time. Not minutes, fractions, milliseconds, drifting every few seconds, as though the water was pulling at the instrument's sense of rhythm. Pressure sensors read steady, but magnetometers twitched. The field strength in the zone rose by 0.3 microteslas small, but constant. That's the strength you'd get near a buried power line, except there are no power lines 3,000 meters under the Pacific. Ships crossing the coordinates reported compass spin. Digital gyros went weightless for a second, then realigned exactly 0.44 degrees off course, the same numeric signature that kept appearing in the bloop's harmonic spacing. Every movement in the drift zone echoed that number, 4-4, a rhythm, not a measurement. By midsummer, the ribbon widened, 10 kilometers across, then 20. It didn't dissolve, it pulsed, expanding and contracting like a living tide. When satellite imagery was time-lapsed, the pulses traced concentric loops, faint spirals around a dead center. Point Nemo again. The color spectrum of those loops matched low-frequency sound compression waves. In other words, the ocean wasn't just moving, it was vibrating. Seismographs on distant islands began picking up identical tremors, perfectly periodic, every 41 minutes and 30 seconds. The old cycle had returned, but this time it wasn't contained below. It was spreading horizontally, carried by the current itself. Sound became motion. Motion became pattern. The sea was now transmitting. Researchers tried to model it. Every simulation crashed at frame 441. When the files were recovered, they contained a repeating phrase in corrupted text. Drift complete. No system logged that string. It simply appeared written inside memory space that had never been accessed. The more they ran the code, the faster the phrase rewrote itself. By the 10th test, the simulation didn't even start. It loaded the message first, as though the pattern was anticipating the input. They pulled the plug, but offshore, The current kept shifting, slower now, patient, like a creature circling prey it no longer feared. In September 2023, a weather satellite captured the drift zone during a rare, moonless night. Under infrared, the water temperature was normal. Under ultraviolet, it glowed faintly, rings within rings, each pulsing at half-second intervals. The outermost ring stretched hundreds of kilometers, faint but visible. Inside it, total calm. Not a wave, not a ripple, just dark glass. That night, ships as far as Chile reported barometers dipping without reason, static-filled open-band radio, and one automatic SOS beacon, unregistered, origin unknown broadcast. A single tone before vanishing into silence. A perfect 440 Hz A. Since then, the maps have quietly changed. Ocean current models show a new minor gyre drifting westward, nameless, unacknowledged. But if you zoom far enough out, the shape becomes clear. A spiral, thin and deliberate, drawing outward from the one place that never should have moved. Point Nemo, the drift zone keeps expanding, and if the timing holds, its edge will brush the southern coastlines by 2027. Not as a wave, not as a storm, just a slow, unseen realignment. The planet's heartbeat rewriting its own tempo. By early 2024, the world had stopped pretending nothing was happening. The sea charts were off by miles. The drift zone was growing, and the satellites above the South Pacific kept blinking out for seconds at a time, always in the same pattern. 4 blinks, a pause, 4 again. The planet's largest dead zone was signaling. Meteorological networks noticed something else. Electrical storms began forming in cloudless skies, flashes that released no thunder and left faint electromagnetic echoes on the ionosphere. The flashes weren't random, they lined up perfectly above the widening spiral, a mirror image of the current below, as if the ocean and the atmosphere had started communicating. When spectrum analysts broke down the light pulses, they found structure. Every burst carried a harmonic stack identical to the tones from Ariel Q's last transmission. Only now, the frequency drifted upward, higher than any deep-sea sound should travel. The ocean wasn't speaking anymore. It was calling out. For weeks, the lights intensified. Airlines began rerouting around the region after cockpit instruments started picking up unlogged radio carriers, whispering faint tones through the intercom. 440 Hz. Again and again. The same. Perfect A. Then, one night, a polar orbit satellite detected something no one could model. A thin column of ionized air shooting straight up from the sea, glowing faint white against the black ocean. It rose for only a few seconds, then faded, leaving behind nothing but stillness. But the data packets that recorded it contained an anomaly, a duplicate of the 1997 bloop waveform, except this one was inverted, turned inside out, like a reflection pushing through the mirror. Every attempt to replay the signal crashed systems. When rendered visually, it showed the same spiral shape that the currents had drawn, only now the spiral wasn't horizontal. It pointed upward, tapering into space. Scientists realized what that meant. The frequency was shifting toward the Schumann resonance range, blending with the electromagnetic shell that wraps the entire planet. The call wasn't local anymore. It was global. And right before the last transmission, a new tone joined the sequence half a step below A, creating a beating interference that sounded like slow breathing. In, out, then silence. Total, permanent silence. For months after, nothing. The ocean returned to its usual rhythm, as if the event had never happened. The drift zone dissolved, the satellite stabilized, and every instrument reset to normal. But in the deepest archives, where raw hydrophone data is stored before filtering, there's a faint, steady hum that never disappears. It's buried under the noise floor, too low for human ears, yet it matches the resonance of the planet's magnetic field exactly. A constant, gentle pulse, repeating, waiting. Some say it's just residual current noise. Others believe the ocean succeeded in syncing itself with the air above a handshake between sea and sky, closing the loop that was once broken. Whatever the truth, the coordinates remain the same: 48 degrees, 52.6, 123 degrees, 23.6 W. Point Nemo, the most isolated point on Earth, and maybe, now, the most connected. When the world sleeps, if you tune a radio to the lowest band and listen between the static, you might catch it. 4 soft tones, rising, then falling, like the heartbeat of a planet whispering back to whoever first listened.